Hey guys, Billy here. I'm a gladiator hunter and this season I've been up 300 in 2v2 and top 200 in the RPG bracket. And this video is a kiting guide with specific tips on how to kite certain classes. I hope you enjoy the video and let me know which tips helped you. And as always, you can subscribe for more hunter content. You can catch me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Billybobbs and you can join my Discord. I'll put the links to both of these in the description. I hope you enjoyed the video. Here in the background, there's a gameplay of me facing Arms Warrior Resto Shaman, and I'm playing with a Resto Shaman myself. So I'll be discussing how to kite whilst the gameplay goes on in the background. Firstly, I'll explain why kiting is important and what it is. Kiting is basically when you want to gain distance from enemy opponents, and you can do this by either using your slows, using mobility increasing effects, such as for Hunter's aspect of the cheetah, or even just pressing W and walking behind a pillar so the enemy cannot hit you anymore. It is really important to learn to kite effectively, and this doesn't necessarily mean running away from the enemies the entire game, but doing so when needed. The reason for this is that it will mean you do not take as much damage from the enemy, as they would not be able to hit you. And this will help your healer save mana, as well as defensive cooldowns from both yourself and your healer. These could then be used later on if you drop low, and it could save you from dying. Kiting as a BM hunter is relatively simple on paper, but in practice it can be difficult. The main tools you have to use while kiting is tar trap, concussive shot, and explosive trap. Sometimes trank shot will also be useful, for example dispelling a paladin's freedom, as well as trapping or stunning the DPS if you're under a lot of pressure and are about to die. Concussive shot is a ranged ability which will slow the target by 50% for 6 seconds. And then whenever you use Cobra Shot, then you'll increase the duration of the concussive shot by 3 seconds. So that means that once you put it on a target, ideally it will never drop from that target, as long as you can always press Cobra Shot. Versus most enemies, this will normally be the first button that you want to press, especially if they're going to train you. Secondly, Tar Trap is extremely useful, especially when kiting around pillars. The reason for this is that when activated, it will be an 8 yards pool of tar where all the surrounding enemies that are in the tar will be slowed by 50%. This is the same slow as concussive shot, and it will allow you to easily get away from enemies and just walk around the pillar without them being able to connect to you, meaning that you will not take any damage. Thirdly, High Explosive Trap is a PvP talent which works similar to Tar Trap, as in the enemies need to walk onto it to activate it. And when they walk into it, it will deal a little bit of damage, but most importantly, it'll also knock them off. This is very good on maps like Blade's Edge Arena, as you can use it and then knock them off of the bridge, which means they can be away from their healer and might have to use a defensive if they cannot get back in time. High Explosive Trap also is a 30-second cooldown, so that means that it lines up perfectly with the warrior's leap. Therefore, it can be used on every leap to knock the warrior away, meaning that they have to waste a charge to get back to you, or any other movement effects they have. Trank Shot was given back to hunters at the start of Shadowlands, and it's a very good ability. It removes 1 enrage and 1 magic effect from an enemy target. Some noticeable effects that it can remove, which are very important, such as Blessing of Protection, Thorns, Freedom from Paladins, and Ghost Wolf from Shamans. It can remove a lot more, but these are the ones that we'll discuss today. And the reason Trank Shot is good for kiting is that if you're facing a paladin, if you purge the freedom, then they're going to have a difficult time to connect to you, as you can concussive shot slow them, and this will make them move at 50% less speed, and therefore they're going to have difficulty connecting to you, especially if you're also utilizing tar traps and running around pillars. Dispelling Thorns is good because, especially in 3s, if you're playing with a melee, the Thorns will slow the melee, so it will mean that your melee is no longer slowed, so they'll be able to run away as well. And then finally, dispelling Ghost Wolf from Shaman is good, as if they're ghost wolfing around the pillar, you might find it difficult to kite them away. And if you dispel the ghost wolf, then they'll lose the movement speed effect, and this will make it a bit easier for you to kite. I'll also talk now about the general uses of kiting for all classes, and these normally involve using pillars as well as each class is slow. For example, a warrior has hamstring, ferals have roots, and most classes have something to either slow the enemy or root them or even disorientate or stun them. And when kiting, you want to run around the pillar, and either the enemy will follow you the same way around, in which case if they are slowed and you are not, then they will not be able to reach you. And if they run the other way around the pillar, you just swap directions and run the other way, and therefore they would be unable to reach you. You can also use CC to kite people as well. For example, a warrior's stormbolt and then leaping away will mean most classes will then be unable to hit the warrior at least for a little bit, so that could allow them to top themselves. When you kite successfully, it's normally extremely frustrating for the enemy, as they'll often have used a lot of their damage and then they will be unable to kill you that go, so they'll have to wait till the next go. And this can mean that you can force pressure from them, and if they do not kite properly, then you might even be able to land the kill before they had their next go, which would win you the game. Now I'll go into a bit more detail about how to kite warrior specifically as a hunter. This can cause a lot of issues for most hunters, and a lot of hunters will lose against warriors because they'll take too much damage and it will be unhealable. Because if you face tank a warrior for the entire game, they will be able to kill you before you can kill them. Some important things to know when facing a warrior is that they have a lot of abilities which will stop you from trapping. For example, spell reflection is the main one, and they get this from either pressing spell reflection, or if they're running the Overwatch talent, they can intervene and that will also give their target spell reflection. That means they can give spell reflection to their healer twice before you're able to trap. To get this off, you normally want your healer to put a dot on their healer, which will remove the spell reflection debuff, and then you're able to trap. However, if done wrong, it will mean that you get trapped instead of the healer, which can make you lose the game. So watching out for the spell reflection debuff on the healer is extremely important. As for kiting warriors, you should always be able to keep a fair distance away from a warrior, because you should have 100% uptime on concussive shot ideally, and then you can also use tar trap to kite around the pillar, and you can also use explosive trap. Ideally, you would use explosive trap whenever they leap to you, because it shares the same cooldown. So your first global against a warrior will normally be a concussive shot, and then when they charge you, you can disengage away, and then if they play double charge, they would charge you again, in which case you have freedom from the pet, which you can use for that, or you can also feign death, the hamstring slow that they will put on you, and then you also have cheater if they manage to connect to you on their leap if the knock trap doesn't work, and then by that time you might also have disengage back, as this will also give you a freedom. So if you can keep one of the abilities that I just mentioned for every charge or leap that they have, then you should be able to kite them most of the time, as long as you keep concussive shot on almost 100% uptime, then you should be fine. They might also try and use Stormbolt to be able to connect to you. And if you are far away, I'd recommend trinketing this so that you keep the distance so that the warrior cannot do as much damage to you. Because especially if you're a human, there's not that much that you need to run trinket for and you're running relay. So most of the time I would trinket a Stormbolt just so that I don't take too much damage. Next, I'll talk about kiting DemonHunters. And although you don't need to kite DemonHunters too much, it can be useful, especially on their burst. I'd recommend versus DemonHunters you can always run Binding Shot, as they can either reverse magic this, but that means they won't have it for trap, which means you can get more pressure, and you don't really need the post haste because they are faster than you anyway, and they will be able to keep up with you even with the post haste. Also, just keeping concussive shot up on the Demon Hunter. Knock trap isn't very useful here, and tar trap is, so you can just use that and run around the pillar. However, because they're a Demon Hunter, they might still be able to connect to you. But if you're successful at using concussive shot and tar traps, then they might have a difficult time connecting and have to waste fell rushes, vengeful retreats, or even night phase to connect to you. Next, I'll talk about kiting Windwalkers. And Windwalkers, especially if you're playing with a Holy Priest, they will normally be able to kill the Holy Priest. So if you can kite them very effectively and peel them away from the Holy Priest, this can help you win the game. But it is difficult. Versus Windwalkers, I'd recommend running a Binding Shot, as they're unlikely to go you, so you don't really need the post haste. Also on maps like Blade's Edge, I would run Knock Trap to try and knock them away. And on most other maps, I'd also run Knock Trap, just so that you can knock away their clones, because the clones will do more damage than the actual Windwalker, as each clone, including the Windwalker, will do 65% damage. So if you can CC both of the clones, then the monk will not do very much damage at all. Other useful things to have on the monk and the clones is putting a tar trap down, So the priest can run around the pillar. Concussive shotting the actual monk, as you can't concussive shot all of them. And then binding shotting all of them so they can't move and they have to use Tiger's Lust. And if they don't have it, then they have to wait for either their healer to dispel or they're stuck in the root. And finally, don't be stacked, because if you're stacked, the Windwalker will do a lot more damage, and then they will likely be able to kill either you or the healer. Finally, I'll talk about kiting rogues. Rogues are fairly easy to kite if done properly, as they have a lot of movement speed, but only in short bursts, as they have sprint and then they have shadow step as well. So if you disengage and then they shadow step, then you can freedom yourself, and then you can use Master's Call and cheater away. Then they're unlikely going to be able to catch you for a little bit if they have no steps left. And in general, against rogues, you always want to try and be max range so they cannot melee you and hit you and get their bleeds up if it's an Asa rogue. And then you always want to keep Hunter's Mark up. You can also run Explosive Trap to knock them away, and you ought to try and keep as much uptime on Concussive Shot as you can. And that will just minimize the damage they deal to you, whilst you're still able to do full damage to them and get CC on the healers. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. This video takes slightly longer to make than commentaries and the other videos that I do, so please let me know if you do want to see more like this or if you just prefer the commentaries. I hope you all have a great day. Peace out.